adventure. Your appointment is tonight, this channel.
Tonight's appointment with adventure stars Louis Jourdain, Claude Dauphin, and Malo Powers. Also tonight on CBS television, see Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town, starring Fred Astaire, the Will Maston Trio with Sammy Davis Jr., Julius LaRosa, Dorothy Dandridge, and others. Also, What's My Line with Dorothy Kilgallen, Arlene Francis, Robert Q. Lewis, Bennett Cerf, and John Daly.
This is the CBS television network. Stay tuned for The Ports That Built a City. See The Whistler tonight on Channel 2 at 11 p.m. You'll like The Whistler. The dramas are basically stories of unescapable justice, in which The Whistler probes into the minds and hearts of evildoers, people who are usual everyday types caught in an emotional whirl. Watch for The Whistler tonight at 11 p.m. on Channel 2. WMAR-TV, the Sun Paper's pioneer television station, on Channel 2 in Baltimore, 4 o'clock.
The Port That Built a City. Behind the story of every great city are the factors that account for its growth, its wealth, and its business. Baltimore's phenomenal rise to the nation's sixth largest city is due to its majestic, sweeping port that brings the four corners of the world across the oceans to your very doorstep. That port handles the second largest amount of foreign tonnage in the United States. That port, in all probability, is responsible for your livelihood, either directly or indirectly, whether you're a salesman, druggist, waitress, architect, doctor, or teacher. Cargoes of ore, sugar, children's toys, men's woolen clothing, and hats daily move across the piers between motor trucks and railroad cars on land and the ships in their waterbirds. These leaders of Baltimore industry have joined together to tell you, its citizens, the greatness of our city because of the greatness of the port. Today, we again join Helen Dealish in the 19th of the 4th annual television series on the story of the port that built a city and serves a nation. This is Maryland, a state reveling in diversified industries, whose vast assortment and success can be traced directly to its ready access of the entire world's raw materials and markets, whose principal port is respected throughout the world. As we've been illustrating to you in the past 2 weeks, every county of this great free state is dependent upon world trade and the Port of Baltimore. Their confectionery and drink manufacturers reach out to the sugarcane fields of the Philippine and Hawaiian Islands. Their canneries draw upon the South African manganese and chrome ores, and their steel products manufacturers need Liberian iron ore. One of the most important steel industries in Maryland is the Bethlehem Steel Company's plant at Sparrows Point, which integrates these ores of the world into steel and tin plate for the industries which are scattered throughout the Baltimore metropolitan area and the state of Maryland. Industries such as the Gunther Brewing Company,
to us here at Sparrows Point. Like many of the employees of this large plant, I feel the world very close to us here, with so many ships going in and out of the port constantly. So over here, many large ore ships carrying iron ore from such places as Venezuela, Chile, Brazil, Sweden, the Near East, the north and west coasts of Africa come and discharge their ores. This plant was built some 66 years ago at this tidewater location in order that the ships from various parts of the world could unload their cargoes right here at this plant and be used here. Now over here we have what we call the high pier. From this pier we reach out to the world in another way. We ship a large variety of finished steel products via many different type ship to both the Atlantic, Pacific, and Gulf Coast of our own country, as well as to many foreign ports throughout the world. Well, you see that here at Sparrows Point, we very definitely are linked with the world. All the continents via all of the 7 seas. Not only that, but perhaps more important here in Maryland is the fact that we are very strongly linked to the most industries here in Maryland and Baltimore City.
To make the finished products, the imported ores, along with coal and limestone, are moved up to the top of the furnaces in these miniature cars. After they are combined according to formula, the molten steel flows into ladles for use around the steel mill. Some of the molten steel is refined further, and some of it is used in the iron foundry. Some of the refined steel is made into tin steel plates to be used as the foundation for tin. Actually, tin plate consists of 98% steel and 2% tin. Here at Sparrows Point is the world's largest tin plate producing mill. And in this room is stored more than $18 million worth of tin plate, which means employment for hundreds of thousands of persons throughout the nation.
The steel industry at Sparrows Point in Baltimore County concludes our microscope story of how the industries throughout the entire state of Maryland are linked in to the Port of Baltimore. Now, these industries move along day in and day out, producing their products and employing hundreds of thousands of people, but they seldom realize how dependent they are upon each other. This interrelationship burst forth like a night-blooming cirrus recently when one of our sponsors, the Gunther Brewing Company, undertook to present a new package design to its customers. When they had to work with all of the different companies involved in the modernization program, they realized that all of these companies also were tied into the Port of Baltimore. And that is very important to the port because of the commodities imported and because the brewing industry is such an important industry throughout the entire state of Maryland. We're going to show you some of the commodities involved in this program that are imported and also tell you a little bit in advance about what went on through Baxter Ward, whom I'm going to welcome aboard the port that filled the city at this time.
Thank you very much, Helen. It's very nice to be here. It's been almost a year, I think, since
It
we were
has
on the
been,
port.
Baxter.
You spoke of the commodities which come into our port, which our Gunther Brewing Company certainly has need to call upon. And I think here are some typical representations. Can you explain what some of these are?
I'll be glad to,
You
Baxter.
tipped me off on this, and I still can't believe you.
This is what went into the paint that goes into the labels on the
You claim
bottles, cans, and on the boxes.
I guess
Iron
you're right at that.
oxide from South Africa and from Spain in coloring.
How about those items?
These are ores which go into the steel as the basic product for the can. Manganese ore from India, chrome ore from Turkey, and iron ore from Venezuela. And of course that is coated then with the tin ore that comes in from Bolivia.
Making any tin can, or as we like to think of it, our own special new can
That's
with its
right.
own new label. Now, the bottles, too, presented a special problem, didn't they, Helen?
Yes, they
I know
did.
they did.
And cork came in from Spain and Portugal and other Mediterranean countries.
That cork, of course, for the inside of the cap. Well, I have to be... Oh, there's one more very
yes, the
important.
wood pulp that comes from Finland, Sweden, and Norway.
Well, I
It
hate to
goes
admit
into the
this,
packages.
This is a terrible thing to say, but when I was, when you give the commercials, you just don't get the full picture because you think of ingredients, and when I think of ingredients, it's the you know, typical...
The hops that come in from Germany.
Right.
Well, that's natural because they go into your product. But all of these are involved in the picture.
Well, we needed a great many things, and our time was important to us, too, and also so was secrecy. We had to line up a whole new advertising campaign for radios, television, newspaper. We had to get everything all set to go. The labels had to be all checked out, the signposts, the billboards, you know, the whole works. It was a terrific problem, and one which we never could have accomplished without having been a part of the Port of Baltimore, and we know
Yes,
it.
and Baxter, lots of people, in fact, hundreds of thousands of people, and hundreds of thousands of man-hours, I should say, were involved, of overtime, were involved in this change.
True, not only at our place, but I guess every place else, too, where we called upon their services.
That's true. Well, let's get on with the beginning of the new Gunther look.
All right. For example, a very important phase in such a vast program is to create the most attractive new look. There were months of researching and sketching. An industrial designer was consulted just for this operation, and that meant that another profession was brought into the changeover process. And thousands of sheets of paper were consumed before a final satisfactory result was obtained. The results of this artist's work then were transmitted to the boxes, the labels, the caps and cans, as well as to billboards, neon signs, and counter advertisements and pictures. And incidentally, the paper for all of this probably originated from Norwegian trees. The other extremely important phase of the new look being conducted under the supervision of Brewmaster Schneider, who is determined to provide only the best. And in his determination to obtain only the best, Brewmaster Schneider has gone far afield to secure the finest hops. Most of them are grown in Germany, the country in which he was trained in brewing. Now, such a purchase stimulates trade with Germany, as well as providing just that taste which Mr. Schneider demands. From the ships, the hops are discharged, usually at the Pennsylvania Railroad Pier, and then transported to the nearby plant. Now, equally important, in Mr. Schneider's opinion, is obtaining the proper grains that go into the brew. From our own Midwest and from Canada, this grain is brought to the tremendous grain elevators along the waterfront and kept there until needed. While many of the necessary items are being produced in the various plants around the Baltimore metropolitan area and the state of Maryland and transmitted to the Gunther Brewing Company, the grain to be used in the making of the beer is unloaded from railroad cars mechanically and then loaded into elevated bins reserved exclusively for Gunther. In the bins, it is cleaned and treated. Then tests are made to ascertain its quality again before it's moved on by railroad car to the brewery. There, again, more experts can tell by various tests whether the barley and other grains are the proper quality. And also at regular intervals, government experts also take samples to further assure quality and standards. The multi-million bushel capacity elevators are served by these vast rail yards, so important to any waterfront terminal. And of course, these rails serve the other piers at the same terminal and handle the other imported raw materials that go into the various industries tied in with our industry transition. Cork is one of the items involved in this story, and that cork comes in by the hundreds of thousands of tons in the Canton section. This bulky, lightweight cargo grows in the Mediterranean area. Spain and Portugal supply the largest quantities of this raw material, which grows on trees. The trees are stripped of cork by the natives, who thus become involved in the operations of one of our numerous industries in Baltimore. Other countries which export cork are Italy and France in Europe, and Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia in Africa. These countries have produced all the cork used in the world for more than 2,000 years. So much cork is imported into Baltimore because the world's largest bottle cap producing plant is located here at the Crown Cork and Seal Company, which covers 74 acres of ground within the city limits. Many of the 5,000 persons employed at Crown Cork and Seal are participating in our Gunther program and are employed here in Baltimore regularly because of the purchase of these caps by our brewery. As in other instances, the new design required a whole new machine to place the red, white, and golden emblem on each cap as it flows off the machines which produce hundreds of caps every minute. So in addition to the cork from the Mediterranean area, these caps are made of tin, of which we've already told you. The cork first is broken up, then processed into composite cork before being converted to the inside of the new bottle cap, that cap with which we all are becoming so familiar. Now, all of these machines we see here are used in making the new bottle caps. The many machines mean many people at work. That work produces items which are linked into our everyday lives as well as the Port of Baltimore. The people working in this plant truly could say that as the port goes, so do their jobs go. They are so interrelated with the ships and the other industries, like brewing, which are dependent upon the port and shipping. Their plant is the largest industry within the limits of Baltimore City. Another industry involved in the Gunther forward-looking move and tied in directly with the port is the box manufacturing industry. Baltimore, because of its waterfront, is the site of numerous box-making plants. The companies making the new boxes are the Eastern Box Company and the Kickheffer Container Company. This waterfront serves as the gateway to the forests of Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Canada, from which come the tremendous trees that ultimately are processed into paper boxes. Paper pulp is made from these giant trees by crushing mechanically or through chemicals. The chemical method is becoming more popular. Then the pulp is converted into corrugated boxes and other types of cardboard for use in our own homes. The Eastern Box Company was founded right on the waterfront here in Baltimore years ago because the huge rolls were moved from the ship direct to the factory by barge. Today, the rolls are transmitted principally by truck. One of the leading box companies in the nation, Eastern Box Company, employs 250 persons. Great care is taken to make certain only the best wood pulp is selected for the cardboard that goes into making the cases and cartons for the new package. The cardboard arrives in the Port of Baltimore from Sweden. Then it's sent through the machinery to be cut off at the proper lengths. All of the cutting and folding is done automatically. And the name and identification on the outside of the containers also represents a boost in business for the ink manufacturers. Now, another Baltimore industry which soon will be part of our new family is the Lord Baltimore Press, which will be making millions of the new labels and will be printing all of the colorful insignia on the new 8-color press it's now building. That press, to be twice as big as a locomotive, is to be the world's largest. Others who benefit, the sign painters, the outdoor sign companies, because all of the displays around the city had to be changed. Here again, the paint and paper manufacturers benefit because of the quantities needed to advertise the new Gunther label and product throughout the state. The pigment manufacturers, such as those we saw recently on this program at Muirkirk in Maryland, also derive work because they supply the brilliant colors that go into the paints. And the pigments originate in Spain, South Africa, Turkey, South America, and the world. Thus, the 300 persons who work in this plant, about 20 miles from Baltimore, also benefit by this transition. The pigments are used in the painting of the trucks as well as on all of the signboards all over the states of Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. The truck painting is a mammoth task in itself. The paint is produced from the pigments at the local factory, then transferred very skillfully by trained painters to the vehicles that are seen on all of our Baltimore City streets. Another major local industry involved in this production of the new look for Gunther, both during the changeover and thereafter, is the tin can manufacturing industry, namely the National Can Company, the Continental Can Company, and the American Can Company. The industry had to change its plates to include the new design to be printed on the tons of tin plate from Sparrows Point as the plates are converted into cans. And even the natives and other workers in Bolivia and Malaya, where the tin ore is mined, indirectly participate in this industry changeover in Maryland. And so do those who produce the iron ore in Venezuela, the chrome ore in the Philippines, and the manganese in India. All of their labors are amalgamated here to produce another adjunct of everyday living. And the ores of the world are discharged at the Western Maryland Railway's Pier 6, Fort Covington, as well as at the Sparrows Point facility. Increased demands for basic steel by industries throughout the entire nation require vast facilities to handle the ore tonnages. In this case, the ore is transmitted to the fiery furnaces, melted, and the required tin plate is thus produced. And from all of these raw materials are produced golden cans with the red and white Gunther symbol of quality in the middle. The tin can manufacturing industry involved employs over 6,000 workers in the Baltimore area alone. These 6,000 jobs are here mainly because of the existence of our port. The tin canister was invented in 1810 by an Englishman named Peter Durand. 15 years later, an American patent was granted to Thomas Kensett of New York. In the beginning, only 10 cans a day could be produced by one man. We can compare that with the assembly line in a modern factory such as this, where from 300 to 600 cans a minute roll off the line. The bodies and ends are cut from sheets of tin plate. The body blands are fed into a machine called the body maker, which notches the corners, turns back each end to form hooks. These later are locked together to form the cylinder by being pressed tightly together. The seam is made airtight, one end is sealed on, the cans go on to the brewery. And the movement to the plant includes also the excellent European-grown hops, which can be harvested only in the fall. These hops then are transported from the waterfront to a refrigerated room at the Gunther Brewing Company, where we are going to see one of the assistant brewmasters, Gabriel Fritsch here, making regular checks and exacting temperatures are maintained to ensure that the delicate flavors of the hops are preserved. Hop growing definitely is a cultivated agricultural operation done through extensive irrigation, so the farmer can have absolute control of its growth, just as the brewmaster has control of its final use. All year round, the grain from the elevators is drawn up into the milling room of the brewery. The Gunther Brewing Company was founded way back in 1881 by George Gunther, a German brewmaster who began what was to become one of Baltimore's most thriving industries. Now, after being drawn up through the extensive pipes, the barley malt's processed through a crushing mill. Even the crushing must be exact, not too fine, not too coarse. The milled malt then is drawn into these scale hoppers where it's weighed and batched. The weighed and batched malt then moves along to the mash tub, where the water and malt are stirred up in one of the earliest steps of brewing. The other grains are passed on through these pipes to the cereal cooker to prepare for the combining with the malt mixture. And the exact temperatures and timers are controlled via this panel of gauges. From the mash tub, the wort, or the liquid, passes to the lauter tub, which contains false bottoms that serve as strainers. To permit the brewers to check, the wort goes through a grunt, permitting the necessary visual inspection. And on into the master brew kettle, where all of the skills of the brewmaster are combined to get the real flavor of the beer. Hops are added at intervals during the brew kettle process. The finest hops are added at the end because they supply the delicate aroma so important to the finest Gunther ever brewed. While the boiling of the wort and hops is underway, constant samples are taken for quality control tests in the modern laboratory. So chemists like William Seibenberg, chief chemist, and his assistant, Vincent Tumanello, find themselves dependent upon the port directly for their livelihoods. The liquid moves from room to room, building to building, in copper pipes, purchased from another Baltimore industry and the world's largest copper smelting plant, the American Smelting and Refining Company. While the cooling is underway in one section of the building, the yeast room workers begin preparing the yeast, which, when added to the cooled wort, begins the fermentation. In the first tank, a culture is being taken and is developed in the other stainless steel kettles in the room. This room contains rows of open fermentation tanks, each of which looks like the top of a lovely lemon meringue pie when the fermentation is at its height. Each one of these stainless steel tanks brew enough to fill 125,000 bottles. As at the other vessels and tanks, samples are taken constantly to determine the specific gravity and quality of the brew at this point. Some fermentation is done in closed tanks. After the fermenting, the brew is aged again in glass-lined tanks. After the aging has been completed, the brew is filtered, not just once, but many times, with the final filtering done through a series of 36 special pads. Meticulous care is given constantly to the brewing kettle and all the other utensils used in this production. Note that spotless appearance. One's zest for beer always is revived by a visit to the traditional racking room, where the first step is the removal of the bungs, then the steel barrels are washed thoroughly by a high-pressure spray. The cleaned and inspected barrels are put on racks and filled before the bungs are driven back into place with special mallets. Now here we see the cans, which were made from the Turkish chrome ore and the Malayan tin, the cans being filled. The new gold label required changes in the filling machine, which finishes 360 cans per minute and spins round and round like a merry-go-round. Then the cans move on to the pasteurizer and the X-ray machine, the first one to be installed locally in beer production.
Every can here is electronically checked to guarantee proper fill. And so the electronic machine manufacturer is tied into the improvement of products and industrial transitions. Now we go on over to the bottling plant where the bottles are sterilized and cleaned. On to the filling unit. The glass industry is tied into this product in this manner. With the introduction of this new look, the machines had to be adjusted. Now the bottles march through just like soldiers on parade, taking on a new face. The capped bottles then move on to the packaging room to be placed in the new cases before being distributed throughout our city of Baltimore, the state, and other states, and even put aboard ships bound for many other ports. This represents more work for waterfront labor, the longshoremen, even the shipyard workers who repair the vessels. All are, to some degree, dependent upon the brewing industry, which pays tens of millions of dollars in taxes to this area. And these monies, of course, are used in building new schools, maintaining the present ones, also in highway construction and maintenance. Now, to handle the increasing demand for its product, which will also generate more business for the other industries involved with it, the Gunther Brewing Company has purchased the land across from its present site. It's now engaged in preparing that land in order to build the multi-million-dollar bottling plant, one of the finest in this nation. And that, too, will provide work for hundreds of construction workers.
And that, they just saw the architect's drawing of the new plant. Baxter, thanks a lot for having been with us today.
My pleasure, Helen. I thank you very much. Pardon my tie being loosened.
And now Ad Wiener will give us the news of around the port this week.
Well, Helen, I guess the biggest piece of news around the port was the announcement of the closing down of the YMCA, Seaman's branch at the foot of Broadway. And I know you made a trip down there to see our good friend Frank Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell has done more probably to promote the American Merchant Marine in his own way in these parts than anybody else. Would you tell us what your gimmick is, Mr. Mitchell?
Most people ashore, Helen, don't realize that weren't for merchant seamen, they wouldn't have such things as coffee, rubber, chocolate, soap, and so on. And so about 6 or 7 years ago, I started handing out foreign coins for folks to carry as pocket pieces.
Let's see some.
There's a few right here. I don't have a very large assortment of them because I can't keep them long. That's a British halfpenny. That's Greek. This is Turkish.
Mr. Mitchell, I know you're not going to stop publicizing the American Merchant Marine even though you're retiring with your YMCA work and your seaman work.
My dear girl, you couldn't make me stop. You couldn't stop me selling the Merchant Marine in the Port of Baltimore if you hit me with a club.
And of course, that isn't all the news in the port. We had quite a few ships come in here of note, right?
Yes, we had the new Norwegian motor ship, the Toreador, which is being handled here by Ramsey Scarlett and Company, arrived and will be in the Far East trade. And then we had an unusual vessel, a new steel barge, which will be operated between Baltimore and South Atlantic ports by the C.G. Willis and Company. It picks up a lot of general cargo down at Recreation Pier. And the ship Constante arrived in port without its foremast after a terrific storm out in the Atlantic. It's down at Maryland Dry Dock undergoing repairs. And then the Coast Guard icebreaker, West Wind, is at the Bethlehem Key Highway Yard preparing for its next 6-month cruise up into the Arctic area.
And a real rough type of cruise it is, too. Incidentally, we would like to have you with us next week at 3:30. It's very important that you join us at 3:30 because we're going to have a repeat of our hour-long presentation of the history of this port, which should be very enjoyable, I think.
Yes, we hope that this will be a documentary that can be used by the schools and all organizations once we are through.
Until then, this is Ad Wiener speaking for Helen Dealish and our entire crew, saying goodbye and a good week to all of you. Baltimore, Port of America, port of the world, and intrinsic part of the economy and protection of your city and mine. That port which is directly responsible for the employment of 90,000 persons and the indirect employment of 300,000 more. The hub where world commerce merges. It is through the civic spirit of these merchants that this series, The Port That Built a City and Serves the Nation, is brought to you for the 4th successive year every Sunday afternoon. Next week, it will begin at 3:30 p.m. The Port That Built a City was originated, produced, and written by Miss Helen Dealish, maritime editor of the Baltimore Sun, directed by Edwin B. Mick, and narrated in part by Ad Wiegert. Today's film portions were produced in the WMAR studios by Charles Purcell, Carol Hebel, and Irvin Kemp.
It's America's favorite singing cowboy, Gene Autry, proving himself master of another bucking bronco.